Welcome back to the second segment of the show. Today we're going to be talking about the European Union, and it is Egypt's largest trade partner, where the trade volume between Egypt and the EU represents about 30% of the total commodity trade between both parts of the world. In light of the interrelationship and interests of the European and Egyptian visions on many regional and international issues, Egypt seeks, through bilateral relations, to achieve an effective partnership, and things are expected to change as well. Here to discuss the priorities of the Egyptian-EU partnership, we're joined in the studio by Dr. Bassem, Kamar, a professor of economics at Monaco University in France. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining us so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Can you tell us a bit about the trade volume between Egypt and the EU? It represents 30% of the total volume. What does this number actually mean?
Well, it means actually the sum of what Egypt sells, exports to the European Union,
yes,
and what Egypt imports as well from the EU.
Yes.
30% is large, so it's number one partner indeed. But actually, the amount of trade can be much larger, and it can be much larger if Egypt manages to export more, to sell more into the European Union, which is, the objective of Egypt in the coming years. And maybe the COVID-19 presents kind of a momentum where global trade is being reshuffled.
Yes.
So now Egypt can actually play its cards and show that its geographical location and all the advantages that it can offer can make Egypt become a hub for investment and for trade with the EU.
I mean, we know that the European Union is an important part of our economic trade. It represents 30%. But is it the same for European nations? Egypt is a strategic partner for them as well in terms of trade.
It's not as large as it should be normally.
Yes.
So if you make a comparison, for example, between Egypt and Turkey, well, Egypt is a much larger partner to the EU.
Yes.
Certainly, having borders with the EU, being member of the EU trade agreement, facilitates access of Turkish merchandise to Europe. But nowadays, with all the logistics, with advancement in shipping and so on, Egypt still, have a much better endowment of natural resources, of capabilities of production that can make it normally a legitimate, more important partner to the EU. So yes, actually, we can play a much bigger role vis-a-vis the EU and become a stronger partner in volume.
Yes.
But strategically, Egypt is, the gate to many things. The gate to Africa. Yes. Definitely, for Eastern Africa, the gate to the Arab world, to the Gulf, and the gate, through the Suez Canal to Asia, definitely. So, and now with gas production and exploration and exports, Egypt as well is becoming more and more strategic, if you like, more important to the EU than before. So it's a very important position Egypt is in that can grow and can just flourish much better.
Egypt signed the Egypt-EU Association Agreement in June of 2001, which is part of the parcel of the European Neighbourhood Policy, known as ENP. But only in 2015 did Egypt and the EU mechanisms establish to push these relations. How do you see this process of shaping the economic ties between the two parties, and why did it take so long to
It's a very good question, actually. This, what we call the Euro-Mediterranean Initiative, started back in 1994, 1995, on the back of the Oslo Agreement and the peace process between Israeli and Palestinian. And the idea of Europe actually was to create a zone of peace around the Mediterranean, driven by economic development. So it's a very interesting objective, great. Sorry. But then when it started materializing, the first step of it was having a free trade agreement. And which means that actually Egypt will have free access without any customs to the European market, but as well that Egypt will have to dismantle, remove all barriers to importing from the EU.
Yes.
And Egypt is a very large market. Talk about nowadays 100 million plus consumer, potential consumer, which actually made it more advantageous for the EU than for Egypt. Because Egypt already at some point, at some level, had this preferential access to the EU market even before the agreement.
Yes.
So what was the main kind of use of additional, except from showing stronger ties and deepening the relationship and attracting more foreign direct investment, European investment, to come to produce in Egypt for the European market, what we call the deep integration.
Yes.
So the idea was to try to, well, let's do this free trade area so we can attract foreign direct investors, maybe even from Asia or from wherever, to come and produce in Egypt for the European market.
Yes.
But it did not really play as we expected for many reasons. One of them is something very technical called rules of origin. So you have to show, for example, to have this free trade access to the EU, that something like 50% of the value added to a product was made in Egypt.
Yes.
So how can you capture it and so on? So it was not that easy for the producer actually. So the country will have a very nice agreement, but when you nail it down to the producer, they don't have the level of sophistication to prove that the value added is more than 50%. So they missed lots of opportunities. So this was on the kind of negative side. On the positive side, through the agreement and through more broadly the neighborhood initiative, Egypt benefited from technical support, not loans or grants, but from technical support and capacity building through several projects and programs that allow the producers then to understand how the mechanisms work, what level of quality do we expect, what packaging, for example, would be appealing to European consumers in different countries to be able to access the market. So the agreement is nice on paper. It can be very useful on the ground, but if you don't know how to make good use of it, you lose the advantage actually.
Yeah, which brings me to the next idea. Is the government working on this in technical training when it comes to the large producers so that they can, show that this is 50% made in Egypt and, export their products to Europe?
Well, the government tries to play the role actually, but there is maybe one issue. So we have very interesting associations and NGOs actually, government entities, just dedicated to this, increasing the awareness of producers and market players and allowing them to get the right capacity to export and to make use of the agreement. But maybe there is a lack of communication. When you go and speak to the producer, and we do some surveys for small and medium enterprises, for example, or even large ones, they don't know that such entities exist. They just don't know. If they just knew about it, and we have a promotion campaign, marketing campaign to tell them, well, if you want to export, go to this agency. If you want to export to the EU, they will guide you, they will help you, they will facilitate, make your life easier, kind of. So, but they just don't know that, and they say, well, I would love to export, but I don't know how. So lack of knowledge in this area of knowledge of the existing facilities is an issue.
Other than, mass production, factories and all of that, when it comes to things like, local businesses or small businesses, like for instance, exporting local products from Siwa and things like that, do you think this has to do or is similar to like the idea of fair trade that you can see in other countries as well, like the get exports from a country and say it's fair trade, so the person that did this, it's a local business, they got the fair price. Is this something that's on the table as well?
Absolutely. Actually, it's a global trend to have more, fair trade, fair production. But also there is a movement toward more engagement and involvement of minorities, if we can say it, like women in business, empowering women. And the issue is that women are actually on the job market, but they are informal. And then they don't have any social protection. They don't have any job protection. They can lose their job and then they lose their income. And this is a big issue, actually, that we all are aware of it, and we didn't really know how to handle it.
Yes.
So through this fair trade umbrella, if you like, there's many initiatives on trying how to involve women and empower women, and but not only women, you know, remote areas like you mentioned, Siwa or Upper Egypt. How we can make sure that those producers who are very talented, who have an exceptional product to sell and to promote, can have the right training, the right skills, be able to export and to promote and to get a fair revenue out of the production.
Yes.
So this is a full program that the EU is supporting through different entities. So, for example, aside from me being Professor of Economics at University of Monaco,
yes.
I am the Chief Economist for the European Bank
yes.
for Reconstruction and Development, which is one of the arms of the EU on promoting these values. How
yes.
can we make investment in Egypt greener,
yes.
more environmentally sustainable?
Yes.
How can we empower women? How can we access investment to remote areas? All these are European values that I try to promote through different NGOs and agencies, entities who are on the ground working in different countries, but also through multinational organizations yes. like the European Bank or the World Bank, IMF and else.
On the sidelines of the Economic Development Conference that took place in Sharm el-Sheikh in 2015, a unified support framework memorandum was signed and the partnership priorities for 2017 to 2020 was adopted during the meeting between the EU and Egypt. Why is this partnership significant, and how does it differ from the previous signings that they've had?
Well, it's just one step to try to formalize and deepen the relationship, and to, as you said, the previous initiatives were nice on paper, but they did not really fly high, you know.
Yes.
So how can we, through this new initiative, have commitments and serious steps that we design together with our partners, and we move forward step by step on trying to accomplish the agreement and to make it become, you know, fruitful
yes.
and enforce it and implement it on the ground. So this was actually how to transform what we have been discussing into concrete steps, concrete actions with concrete results, if you like.
Which brings me to the next idea, that the main focus of the memorandum, as far as I understand, is that it was on Egypt, you know, sustainable modern development and social development. These are big words, but what do they actually mean? Yeah.
So when we talk about sustainable development, you yes. know, you can produce and you can pollute by producing.
Yes, exactly.
And then, well, some producer will just make some wealth, and they will leave the country and the area polluted and inhabitable for the next generations, which is against human rights, if we can say it. So the idea is how to make sure that moving forward with Egypt strong need
yes.
for economic development and job creation, we do not get being tempted by investing in projects that will have, you know, negative
environmental
exactly
effects.
Environmental effects. So we want it to be green. What do you mean by green? Green is a nice word, you know. But for example, the massive production of energy in Egypt that comes from renewable energy. If you remember, 8 years ago, we had shortages in electricity supply, several hours per day. We don't see it at all now. And most of this comes from sustainable sources, like the solar park that was built in Binban near Aswan, which is one of the largest in the world, if not the largest, one of the largest in the world, and all these wind farms that have been built around the country to benefit from natural resources and to produce energy in a cheaper way. So it's cheaper,
yes,
even it's not just more expensive,
it's
cheaper and it's sustainable. So it's kind of a win-win. So, but how can we come to the knowledge and technology to be able to do this, actually? This is where the European Union and other partners step in. They provide the right technical assistance, so the government will understand how can they buy the electricity from private producer, so yes. Private investment. How can they price it? How can they make use of it? How they can license it in an efficient way? to maximize the revenue to the government and to have a successful project. This is something that we all learn about. It's a new field. So the EU here provided a significant grant to the Egyptian government to step up capacities and to get them to understand how all this technology, this is one example, you know, how to make the economy more sustainable by making it greener, less polluting.
But that's the goal. 2050 is supposed to be zero emissions, generally speaking, for most countries in the world.
Hopefully.
Yes, hopefully.
Hopefully. 2050 is, you know...
It's a big target. It's ambitious, but hopefully we'll get there.
Hopefully, absolutely.
The EU and Egypt agreed to cooperate in advancing socio-economic goals that were set by Egypt, you know, Egypt's vision for 2030.
Yes.
And these are in line with the UN, you know, social development goals as well,
absolutely.
and sustainable development goals.
Yes.
Why are the social and environmental dimensions important, and why, like we were talking about, obviously the environmental factor is very important, but why does it contribute to society as well, not just in terms of keeping the environment safe?
Absolutely. Yeah, more importantly, the human. Yep.
Yes, yes. How does this socially affect people when you're greener?
Well, you know, let us go back in time, something like 10 years ago, when we had the Egyptian uprising in 2011. Just before, actually, 2008, 9, and 10, growth rates in Egypt were very high, something like 6 or plus 6%. Debt was declining, so the macroeconomic situation was quite okay.
Yes.
And by international standards, the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, you name it, thought that Egypt was doing very well, actually, growing fast, employment is declining, but on the ground, in reality, poverty was very high. Poverty was high in remote areas. Wages did not increase despite this high growth. And then we had the revolutions in Tunisia, which was also doing quite okay on the macroeconomic level, and in Egypt. So it was kind of a surprise to the world and to international organizations to see, well, we thought things were okay. What's wrong? What is wrong is that this economic model, this growth model, creates wealth, but does not trickle down to the entire society.
Yes.
So it was a wake-up call to the entire world, actually, not only to our countries or to Egypt. So the model had been rethought. Well, if there is a failure and this growth is not generating wealth to everybody, how can we create this new sustainable model where actually human being is put up front?
Yes.
How can we make the largest part of the population better off, increase welfare, not through redistribution, but through providing them with decent jobs.
Yes.
A good job, well paid, in good normal working environment, that should be fine. And by the way, if you look at advanced economies, you look at France, for example, you had massive demonstrations, what we call the gilets jaunes, the yellow jackets.
Yes.
You look at the elections in the US, they voted Trump, and so you see that there is a discontent globally from the way the economic, macroeconomic level was managed.
Yes.
So there is a need really to rethink this model and to see how can we put back human, not capital, human, actually, on the forefront of this model, and to see how can we make this growth model, economic development model, be
But this brings me to another idea. If we're talking on a global level, does this mean that capitalism is a model that's no longer working for the world? Do you think that we're going to be moving to more of a social sort of model?
I don't think it to be a social model in any way, but it's just a way of correcting some errors. Let's take the example of the global crisis in 2008. Banks kind of abused and started giving loans without double checking. It led to the collapse of banks, a banking system, a global crisis.
Yeah, they were the ones who got saved in the end. I mean, the people that lost
Absolutely. People lost their jobs, lost their homes, kids were out of school.
Exactly, the regular man.
So it means that there is an issue.
Yes.
Not the entire capitalist system is wrong, but there are some failure, and the role of the state is to look at this and try to correct.
Yes.
Having more supervision, for example, having the right rules, regulations, laws, and enforcing them, and having accountability. So these are things that actually are needed to control those who might abuse the system. You cannot just let everything just completely free and liberalism to the extreme. No, you have to monitor, you have to be very careful. You have to put in place some restrictive laws and regulations to make sure that there is no deviation.
Well, let's get back to the Egyptian-European relations. Egypt has succeeded to become a country of operations at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in coordination with EU institutions and member states, enabling Egypt to benefit from financial as well as technical support from the bank. What is the country of operation for the EBRD, and why is that important? I mean, this is a statement that's very broad, but most people won't understand.
So I am actually the chief economist as the EBRD for the Middle East, what we call the South and East Mediterranean region. And this European Bank was created back in 1991 to upgrade, to upscale the East European countries to become market economies. They were just, planned economies, Soviet bloc, and to allow them to access the European Union at some point. So the kind of, the lifetime of the EBRD was something like 20, 25 years to bring all these countries up to the European level. But they acquired so much knowledge on how to promote market economies, make them well functioning and so on. But at some point they said, well, shall we now just shut down the EBRD and waste all this knowledge as it had been accumulated? And this was actually at the same time when in Egypt we had and other Mediterranean countries the Arab Spring, if you like. So they said, well, actually we can help our Mediterranean neighbors as we did with our East European countries. So let's just give them our expertise. And this started in 2012-13. Since then, EBRD invested in Egypt, quite substantially, something like 7 billion plus of investment. And because of Egypt's very interesting role in the global economy and in the region, Egypt became #1 country of operations, which means that Egypt gets much more investment than any other country of the EBRD. And this have been happening for the past 2 or 3 years, actually. So they managed to help and to provide, as you just said, technical assistance, not just giving loans. It's investment. It's investment in humans, in human and investment in private projects, investment in public government projects when it facilitates private investment. Because the main mandate of the EBRD is promoting private investment. So if you need, let's say, a desalination project to help private investment, EBRD will help building it. But it's not the motivation of to invest in public enterprise, if you like, but just to promote private investment.
Yes, unfortunately, we're out of time. So, Dr. Bassem Kamar, a professor of economics at Monaco University in France, thank you so much for joining us and enlightening us on this special relationship.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of this episode of Cairo Local Time, but stay tuned for more on Nile TV.